Okay, that covers our constitutional amendments. Let's move on to our Alachua County amendments. The first one, and these are not numbered, so we're just going to go in order of the way they'll appear on the ballot. So the first one is the renewal of the existing 1 mill. And I can read, I'll read the text just for anybody who hasn't heard of the 1 mill. Shall the Alachua County School District's existing 1 mill ad valorem tax be renewed beginning July 1st, 2021 and ending 4 years later on June 30th, 2025 for necessary operating expenses to fund school nurses, music, art and drama programs, school library programs, school counseling programs, band and chorus programs, academic magnets, career technical programs, and to update classroom technology with oversight by an independent citizens committee. Alex?
Well, I loathe to support any tax increase, but so I'm going to make one case in the sense that this is a renewal of a tax. This is not a tax increase. This is a renewal. You know, my objection to this is in a bigger context than what's here, right? Because I don't want ever the record to show that I'm against counseling programs and libraries and schools. Bryan, don't do it. The bigger perspective here is just the size of the school board. You know, most voters don't realize that when their property taxes, a majority of their property taxes, a bigger portion of the property taxes are going to the school board versus the county commission. You know, so this is now following their 1 mill or I'm sorry, the tax increase that they got on the spending just recently for infrastructure in the schools. So, you know, there's some point to where you start to think the school board is slightly greedy and maybe growing a little bit too big, you know, but whether we're at that point or not, the voters will decide. My guess is that, you know, the voters in Alachua County over the years have been extremely supportive of anything educational and are willing to pay for those types of things. So my guess is this is likely to pass.
Okay, Bryan?
Yeah, I'm actually working on this initiative. I love working on these school initiatives. I worked on the half cent before, and it's very fulfilling to see what's happening with the half cent, to see the new schools that are being built. And with the 1 mill, you can go to School Board of Alachua County's website, go through and see what each school is going to be, or what is currently being funded. Things like guidance counselors, like computers and technology in the classroom, like the arts programs. These are really great programs that really go a long way to helping the students in our community. As far as the money going to schools, as Alex talked about, funding education is just expensive. It's it's a large part of the budget because it's pricey. Every year, as a cost per pupil, the state of Florida is dropping the amount of funding that's going to our local school districts, and we're having to cut down more and more as a way to make that work. Without this, you will certainly lose those arts programs, certainly lose those band programs. You'd probably keep some of them and then have to find other ways to cut in the meantime. So there could be some ripple effects across the way on this, and I think it's but broadly, it's just these are very good programs. They're really good for our students. I have a newborn daughter that I had about 2 months ago. I'm really looking forward to her having, these programs when she gets into school in a couple of years. And I think funding our education is a really good investment for us.
As someone who had a couple of kids in band, and I know Alex will agree with you, you may come to regret that when those instruments are going full bore. But no, band and all school programs are wonderful, and it is very gratifying when your kids really take advantage of all their educational opportunities. So, all right, very good. Let's move on to another one that I think we'll have a little bit of back and forth on. The county's charter amendment establishing a county growth management area. Shall the Alachua County Charter be amended effective countywide to establish a county growth management area? Provide that the county's comprehensive plan and land development regulations will exclusively govern land development in the area, whether inside or outside municipal boundaries. Authorize implementing ordinances, provide for removal of lands from the area, and provide that the charter and implementing ordinances shall prevail over conflicting municipal ordinances. All right, that's a mouthful. Go ahead, Bryan. Tell us what you think.
Well, so the idea behind this really is comes from the idea of creating a ring around the cities as a way to, how do you incentivize development within your municipalities and within your cities? Probably the easiest way to do this, let me see if I can share my screen here, is to actually show the map. Can you guys see this?
Yes.
See the map here?
Yeah.
So this is the map. The areas that you see here are all in either environmental protection land, agriculture, or in very low density rural housing. And so Newberry, for instance, or Archer or Alachua can grow anywhere they want within their community. They have full zoning. They can even, there's still plenty of room to annex outside of here, right? So I've heard some estimates that they probably have 50 to 100 years of growth before they'll ever really need to annex outside of their municipal boundaries. But as soon as they annex, say, into this green area, then the zoning of that area needs to be done in conjunction with the county commission for their zoning. So the concept here is essentially to how do you keep cities growing in their urban area, which is less expensive to provide services, and just keeps the kind of sprawl that you see throughout that's kind of endemic to Florida. It's I moved here from Orlando where you just go by suburb to suburb to suburb without much green space in between it. How do you make sure that these remain agriculture and wild areas in between municipalities where people are living, as opposed to sort of a nonstop growth area between all of these? So the cities still have the ability to grow within their boundaries, to do what they need to without there. But if they kind of touch into these areas that they've designated as wild and rural or agricultural, then they just need to work with the county commission on that, which probably won't happen in our lifetimes, but will happen at a certain point because there's still plenty of room to grow within the city boundaries or outside the city boundaries. And so I think it's a good idea. I like the way our community is. I like living here because of the green spaces in the wild areas. I used to live in Orlando. I'm happy to leave partially because the nonstop 45-minute drives through sprawl drove me crazy. And I think that it's great that we're going to be trying to put policies forward that would try to incentivize growing inside of our cities as opposed to outside.
Okay. Alex, what do you think?
I think on this amendment, Bryan is completely full of it. If you put back up the map, Bryan, which I think is actually pretty good, but I think what a lot of the left is doing is they're dressing this up in an environmental frame, and it's not. This is about power, and it's about who exercises power. And this is the county commission trying to tell smaller cities, landowners, what they can and what they can't do. And I think Bryan innocently frames it as in, well, if we have a problem in 50 years, you can come work with the county commission. Nobody wants to work with the county commission. They're unable to work with anybody in order for this process. So I think that this one is actually really controversial. And this is a power grab by the county commission. I do think that's why you're seeing the city of Alachua, I believe the city of Newberry are entering into lawsuits to prevent this from happening. But this is about land use and who gets to decide on what to do with land. And again, this is a power grab by the county commission wanting to tell landowners in smaller municipalities on what they wanted to do. And the frank thing is if a municipality didn't want to have its own home rule, then they would just unincorporate and become part of unincorporated Alachua County. That's not what's happening. These cities are closer to those land parcels, they're closer to those landowners, and they should be able to grow and annex according to recent things without the power grab by the county commission.
Bryan, did you want any follow-up on that?
No, I mean, not much except to say that, they still have every right to grow within their communities, right? My initial reaction, I was on the city charter review, which we'll talk about in a little bit. My initial reaction to this wasn't dissimilar from Alex's. I live in the city of Gainesville. We've had our own fights with the county commission. like looking over it and really for this, so that I could, talk with you guys about it, was realizing that this isn't nearly as onerous or as aggressive as it might appear from the outside, or as some of the folks, a lot of people that I think are great, like Ed Kerper or Jordan Marlowe, who feel very strongly about this issue. I think it's a very common sense way to do what you see work very well, like outside of Portland or outside Vancouver, where they're just trying to make it so it is harder to develop in these rural areas, so that you can make it and then be able to build within your city areas, which this amendment has no impact on. This amendment fully allows them to have their zoning, to work with their local landowners within their own municipal boundaries, and to do what they think is best within their cities.
Well, and I will say, just in a final note, because I think Bryan actually brings up a really good point. This is bigger than just rural outlying communities versus the county commission. This is also about how the city of Gainesville annexes and grows, and so again, this is about power and who has it. And I will close on that. So the voters will get to decide on who has the power.
Okay, very good. Thank you so much. Okay, so we'll move on now to the next one, which is the relationship between county and municipal ordinances for the protection of certain natural resources. Shall the Alachua County Home Rule Charter Section 1.4 be amended to authorize countywide protection of certain natural resources by establishing that the more protective of county or municipal ordinances for such purpose shall prevail to the extent of any conflict and be enforceable countywide? So this is clearly an add-on to the last one. So let's hear your thoughts, Alex.
I mean, the same argument goes into place here, in the sense that this is once again another power grab. This is the county commission basically saying that we will take the more restrictive of any type of land use. And the bottom line is a lot of people choose to live in a municipality in Alachua County because of the rules that they have. And that is one of the reasons why they do it. So again, if you want Alachua County's county commission to have additional and more power over land use, then you will vote for this. I can't imagine giving the county more power than what they have. I'm voting emphatically no.
Okay, Bryan.
So when voters passed the Amendment 1 language a couple of years ago, they gave the county commissions in every county in the state of Florida the ability to regulate air and water resources for a very specific purpose. That there's certain environmental things that need to be done sort of on a regional planning basis, right? Water and air in particular, water doesn't stop; it continues to flow. It goes into the groundwater, and so we need to be talking about that from a more regionalized perspective, as opposed to a municipal perspective with different groups focusing on that. This sort of takes that same concept that the voters voted for and expands it out to just a couple of key things like wildlife corridors, things like natural geographic. I think geologic formations, just some very specific things that move across municipal boundaries into other boundaries. That it's not a broad zoning oversight. It's not anything like that. It just if there's some very specific environmental protection that needs to be done, that there can be regulations done at the county level that would allow that to happen in the same vein and the same spirit as water and air protection.
Okay. All right, very good. Okay, let's move on to the next one, which is Alachua County's identification and elimination of racial and gender bias in county policies. Shall the Board of County Commissioners annually examine policies for all county operations and endeavor to eliminate all elements of racial and gender bias in both the design and delivery of county programs and services? Bryan, why don't you jump in first on this one?
Yeah, so this is supported by the Democratic Party, Sierra Club, numerous other groups. Essentially, it's an extension of a concept called a racial equity toolkit. It's how do we in government address racial issues in our governments in a time where there's not, Jim Crow laws that are out there, right? It's hard to point at things and say, this is a clearly racial discriminatory policy. And so Madison, Wisconsin started working on it. I think Seattle picked it up after they did. And the idea is that as policies are going forward, you just look at the impact that it might have on minority groups and just assess that on a regular basis. Usually it starts off on a budget or starts off like this one on an annual plan where you would look at your policy, see if there's things that may go in there, and just bring that forward, and then policymakers and voters can decide what it is that they want to do with that. This is a fairly easy first step that will not have a huge impact on much of anything. Hopefully it'll be a first step. Usually cities kind of up it from there once they kind of get their feet under them as how this process works. They might try it for other policies that are going forward, bring it up into different things. But it's a good first step into addressing those and just finding a good systematic way to look at and address those policies that might have discriminatory impact.
Okay, Alex?
I have conflicting feelings about this, because again, anytime we start talking about racial and gender bias, it's a very difficult conversation. One, on this amendment, I'm not sure what it does. I don't know if it is whitewashing a problem, and frankly, by the language, annually examine. I mean, could the county publish a one-sheet piece of paper that says there's our study and move on? My second kind of concern is, does something like this actually belong in the charter? That's essentially the charter amendment. The charter is the constitution for the county. Something like this, I mean, those commissioners could adopt it and do it tomorrow. I don't understand why it needs to be in the charter. So I really don't have a recommendation on this because I'm not fully aware and understand what the long-term ramifications, if any, are. I will just trust the voters to use their best judgment and decide for themselves.
Okay, very good. Okay, the next one I think we'll have a little more discussion probably. The county charter amendment would establish Alachua County Affordable Housing Trust Fund. Shall the Alachua County Charter be amended to establish an Alachua County Affordable Housing Trust Fund used to create and sustain affordable housing, which may be funded by fees from new commercial and residential development and other sources, all as directed by the County Commission, and to provide for the purposes, revenue sources, appropriation, and expenditure of funds, annual audit, continuing nature, implementation by ordinance, and administration and oversight of the trust fund. Alex, why don't you get started on this one?
Well, and again, this goes back to control, it goes back to trust, and it goes back to the specific language that is in this charter amendment. And I do think if we're trying to do something like this, or if the powers are trying to do something like this, in the charter is not where it belongs. Because when you start putting language as in other revenue sources, and I put those in air quotes, other revenue sources, those are so broad that any charging document, any county commission can basically do whatever they want. So I've heard this described somewhat as, oh, well, this is innocuous. There's not a lot of money here. And we can just establish this and we can get going. One, I do think it's anti-market. I think the free market will provide for some of the housing goals that we're trying to meet here. But two, this gives way much control, and it could have a very detrimental effect to new commercial and residential development. We just don't know what the effect this would be. And so I think this is going to boil down to, do you trust the county commission to levy fees versus not levy fees? And I would vote no.
Okay, Bryan?
I mean, I think it's extreme. I think it's one of the more innocuous amendments that's in here. Essentially, it would create a fund that would then have an oversight board, right? The county commission currently does allocate money for affordable housing. And while the market, affordable housing is a big term that encompasses a lot of different types of people and a lot of different income levels, but the market can't provide for all of those things. The county commission spends a lot of money on Grace Marketplace, for instance, which I serve on the board of. There's no market force that solves that problem. some either charity or some other group has to go in there. All this does is create a set aside fund that pays for it out of the same taxes that we're paying currently. I mean, the county commission can't just arbitrarily raise tax without asking the voters or coming out and saying that they're going to levy taxes. It's just now they're going, instead of them overseeing it, they're going to be allocating it over to this, which will have an oversight board instead of not have an oversight board. It's I think it's fairly innocuous. Hopefully it'll add a little bit more transparency to it. Hopefully it will, if you have a fund like this and it's just consistently is underfunded, hopefully someone will point to it and say, hey guys, what are you doing over here? Like you said, you wanted to fund affordable housing and you keep not funding it. Hopefully, but that's about the extent to what it'll do. It's yeah, I mean, it's good to have. I think it's good to have a line item like that that's in there. But I'm a yes on it. But I don't think it will. It's certainly not a power grab by any stretch of the imagination, in my opinion.
Well, and I think my objection goes to what you were just saying, Brian, in the sense that, okay, we have this fund, no one's really funding it. What are you guys doing? And this language says specifically, which may be funded by fees from new commercial and residential development and other sources. So what we're talking about here is impact fees and other sources, however that's defined. And we just don't have a good handle on that. So going with the logic that you have, right? Okay, we have this fund, nobody's funding it. Well, I guess we should raise impact fees because the charter calls for it. Well, I guess we could look at other sources for revenue, utility hookups. It's just poorly defined. And I think that is something, if we want to do this, then I do think it's probably best left up to the legislative process.
I mean, yeah, there's always pressure to fund more things. If they wanted to raise impact fees, they could raise impact fees. Alex, I'm sure you would be calling them up and saying, I don't want impact fees, put into here. But I mean, all this does is just create a board that exists that may or may not be funded in any capacity that would fund this sort of thing. If you're saying you don't want the pressure on them to be able to fund affordable housing, I would assume that they would just take what they're already spending on affordable housing and put it into this fund instead of it being just a line item in their budget. It would now be a line item under this new thing that was created under the charter, which seems innocuous enough to me.
Well, then I think we need to change the language to include Bryan Eastman's assumptions because it's not in the language. That's my objection.
Okay, you're gonna let it stand there, Brian?
Yeah, that's fine. I would love to have my name put in the charter. I wish they did that already.
We've got an amendment coming up for you in Gainesville then.
Okay, well, let's move on then to get to that. All right, our next one is the county charter amendment concerning candidate treasurer report requirements. Shall the Alachua County Charter be amended to remove any requirement that candidates file treasurer reports on paper while retaining the existing requirement that they must file treasurer reports electronically? What do we think about this? Brian?
This is my baby. I love this one. When they started the county charter amendment process, I said, the one thing I want is, I am a millennial. I hate pieces of paper. I want to do everything online. And I'm sick of every time that my candidates have to turn something into the supervisor of elections, I have to turn it on paper. It's outdated. It's silly. I know this is not a big deal. This is not the number one thing that the charter should be looking at, but it's a pet peeve of mine. And I was surprised. I didn't really follow the amendment process, but it's now in here. I mean, it's the same thing. It's a silly little change, but right now, if I happen to be if a candidate or someone happens to be out of town when it comes time to turn in the paperwork for financial disclosures for elections, you have to turn in paperwork to show financial disclosures, to show various things for elections, so that so the voters know where you're getting your money, how you're spending your money, things like that. You are at the county level right now. You have to turn it in online, and you have to get a physical piece of paper signed and turned in. Sometimes you only have about a 24 to 48 hour turnaround time to do that. So you have to run down to the supervisor of elections, get that over to them, or you get fined. It annoyed me. It's always annoyed me. I'm glad they're doing this. I strongly encourage everyone to vote yes on it.
Okay, Alex?
Well, seeing that this is
Do you
Brian's,
love paper? We're the same generation. Do you love paper? I love paper. Come on.
I was going to say, seeing that this is Brian's baby, I would want to call Brian's baby ugly. No, I actually agree with him. I think there's no reason why we should continue with paper. It slows down the process. It makes the process more difficult if you're trying to do any type of data work. So I fully support these treasury reports being electronic. My only question is what if the electronic version fails? But I'm sure we'll address that as we go down the road. But I really, I loathe to say this, but yes, I agree with Brian.
Very good. All right. Okay, well then that's a perfect segue to our last Alachua County amendment, County Charter Cleanup Amendment. I love that title. Shall the Alachua County Charter be amended to remove 2 unconstitutional provisions, one unconstitutionally prohibiting protections based on sexual orientation, sexual preference, or similar characteristics, and another imposing unconstitutional residency requirements for Alachua County Commission candidate qualifying? Alex, what do you think?
Well, I think we're a nation built upon law and order, and these things have been determined to be unconstitutional in Florida, and I don't think the county charter is out of line by removing things and bringing the Constitution or the charter in line with constitutional court cases. So I have no problem. I would vote yes. To me, this is a cleanup amendment.
Okay, Brian?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with Alex. It also has the added benefit of being both a cleanup amendment, and what it's cleaning up is the striking down of LGBT, the creation of protections for LGBT people under the United States Constitution from the Obergefell ruling, which it made LGBT Americans a protected class. So these 2 amendments were anti-gay amendments that were put into the county charter, and so it cleans that up. It also, removes a little bit of discrimination that we still held in our charter from an earlier time.
Okay, very good. Okay, that takes us to the end of the county amendments. We're about at 10:30.